Welcome to e-commerce psychology, powered by Growth Suite. Growth Suite helps you run smart discount campaigns on your store.
That's right, and you can test it for free on your Shopify store. Just land on the Shopify App Store now and test it for free.
And you are here for a deep dive into, well, one of the most powerful forces shaping how you receive information every single day. It's often overlooked, actually.
It really is. It influences what you buy, maybe who you vote for, even the health choices you make, and often you don't even consciously notice it's happening.
Right. Like, think about it this way. If you needed financial advice, right?
Right.
Would you trust advice from some super successful entrepreneur the same as, I don't know, a random person posting tips online?
Probably not. No. Or say health advice, does it land the same if it comes from your doctor versus maybe a friend or just, some account you follow?
Definitely not. Even if the message is identical, who says it? That changes everything.
Exactly. And that difference, that's the core idea we're really going to unpack in this deep dive. It's this surprising truth that the secret to a message sticking might not be the message itself.
The messenger.
Precisely, the messenger.
Okay, let's get into this then. Our mission today is to understand the psychology here. Like, why are we wired to judge info based on who's delivering it?
Yeah, and we'll explore the science behind what makes a messenger effective. We'll look at how businesses, health organizations, how they all strategically choose who speaks for them.
And most importantly, figure out how you can use these insights, whether you're communicating yourself or just trying to navigate all the messages coming at you every day.
It's fundamental to how we communicate. And honestly, once you start looking for it, you see the messenger effect everywhere.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What exactly is this thing, the messenger effect?
So at its core, the messenger effect is it's a cognitive bias. Think of it like a mental shortcut. It just means that the perceived characteristics of the person delivering the message, how credible they seem, their expertise, maybe even just how much we like them, that stuff significantly influences how we receive and process the message itself.
So instead of just weighing the message, the actual content, we're kind of filtering it through the person.
We are, yeah. Subconsciously, often. And look, this isn't some brand new idea. Psychologists have studied this for ages. You've got work going way back, like Hovland's source credibility theory.
Right, showing how things like perceived expertise make messages more persuasive.
Exactly. And you see it play out so obviously now. I mean, why do companies spend fortunes on celebrity endorsements?
Or put doctors in ads for medicine.
Yeah, or why do political campaigns agonize over choosing the right spokesperson? It's all the messenger effect.
And it's not just big campaigns, is it? It affects businesses every day. You mentioned trust.
Oh, hugely. Consumer trust is key.
Yeah.
Research consistently shows something like 70% of people trust recommendations from peers, other consumers, more than they trust content coming directly from a brand.
70%. Wow. So things like customer reviews, testimonials, that's tapping into that peer messenger power.
Massively powerful for anyone selling anything. It's social proof, right?
Yeah.
We trust people like us.
Yeah.
And beyond marketing, think about crisis communication.
Oh, yeah.
When a company messes up, picking the right person to speak, to apologize, to explain, that can literally make or break whether they regain public trust.
And politics, too, you see it all the time. It's not just the candidate, but who they send out to speak to different groups.
Absolutely. Even inside a company, right? Internal messages about big changes, they land totally differently depending on who delivers them. People are much more receptive if it comes from a manager they trust, for example.
That does raise an interesting point, though. If we're so swayed by who is talking, what about finding objective truth? If someone's chosen just because they're persuasive, not because they're actually the expert.
That's a really important ethical question. When does strategic messenger selection cross the line? Choosing someone for persuasive power versus genuine expertise or honesty. It's complex.
Yeah.
And it drives a lot of research in this field. Like, how do we select messengers effectively and ethically? How do we ensure transparency? How does this work in different situations? And what's really going on in our heads?
Which is the perfect segue. Let's get into the science. Why do our brains work this way? Why are we so susceptible to the messenger?
What's fascinating, it really comes down to how our brains try to be efficient. There are these psychological models, like the elaboration likelihood model, or ELM, and the heuristic systematic model.
Okay.
They basically suggest we process information in two main ways. Sometimes we really think deeply, analyze the content carefully. That's high elaboration.
Right, putting in the mental effort.
But other times, especially if we're busy, tired, distracted, or just not that motivated, we fall back on mental shortcuts. heuristics.
Ah, the shortcuts. So like when we're doom scrolling or juggling tasks?
Exactly. And that's when the messenger becomes super important.
Mm.
Their credibility, how much we like them, if they seem like us, these become quick cues.
So instead of digging into the details, we think, oh, they look like an expert, or hey, they're like me, and we just sort of trust it based on that feeling.
Precisely. That's authority bias, the shortcut, where we
Yeah.
tend to just trust perceived experts.
Yeah.
And the similarity liking principle means we're just naturally more open to messages from people who seem like us, share our background or values.
And you mentioned emotional contagion before. How does that fit in?
Oh, it's a big part. The emotions, the messenger shows confidence, warmth, passion.
Mm.
They could sort of infect us.
Infect us.
Yeah, subconsciously influence how we feel about the message. A confident messenger can make the information itself seem more valuable or trustworthy, even if the content is pretty neutral. Their energy kind of rubs off.
Huh. It colors our perception. Is there actual brain science behind this, like physical stuff happening?
Absolutely. Neuroscience is digging into this.
Yeah.
Using fMRI scans, researchers see increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain's decision-making hub, when we're evaluating how credible a messenger is.
So our brain is actively checking out the source before fully processing the message content.
It seems that way, yeah. And even cooler, getting messages from people we trust can actually trigger the brain's reward system.
Like dopamine.
Exactly, a dopamine release,
Yeah.
which creates this positive feeling, making us even more likely to listen to that source next time.
Wow. Our brains are literally rewarding us for trusting certain people.
Pretty much. And on the flip side, if we perceive a messenger as untrustworthy, maybe even threatening, the amygdala can fire up.
That's the fear center, right?
Right. And that triggers skepticism, resistance,
Yeah.
puts our mental guards up against the message.
So it's deep-seated stuff. Our brains are heavily involved in vetting the messenger. And this doesn't happen in isolation, right? It interacts with other biases we have.
Oh, completely. The messenger effect gets tangled up with other cognitive biases all the time. Take the halo effect.
Ah, yeah, where if someone's good at one thing or maybe just attractive, we assume they're good at other unrelated things too.
That's the one. So a really good-looking celebrity or someone super successful in business might get undue credibility when they talk about, say, health or politics,
Mm-hmm.
just because of that positive halo.
Even if they know nothing about it.
Right. And confirmation bias is huge here, too, especially now, with everything being so polarized.
Tell me about it.
Well, we naturally seek out and trust messengers who confirm what we already believe. It feels good, right? But it's a key reason we end up in echo chambers, only hearing voices that agree with us, making us resistant to different perspectives, even valid ones.
That's a massive challenge if you're trying to communicate important information across divides.
It really is.
Yeah.
And authority bias, while often useful, we should generally listen to experts, can also lead us to just accept things without thinking critically, just because someone with a title said it. That's risky if the authority is wrong or, has an agenda.
Okay, so we've got the why, the shortcuts, emotions, brain chemistry, other biases. Now let's talk about the what. What actually makes a messenger effective? Because clearly some people are just more persuasive than others.
Yeah, you're right. Lots of things matter, but credibility usually sits right at the top. And credibility, you can kind of break it down into two main pieces: expertise and trustworthiness.
Expertise seems obvious. They need to know what they're talking about.
Basically, yeah. Perceived knowledge, qualifications, skills in that specific area. You want health tips from a doctor, not your plumber. Their credentials signal that expertise.
Makes sense. And trustworthiness. That feels more personal.
It is. It's about believing the messenger is honest, has integrity, and actually has your best interests at heart, not just trying to sell you something or push an agenda.
Yep.
That's often why, say, nonprofits or independent researchers might seem more trustworthy on social issues compared to, like, a company spokesperson.
The COVID example really hits this home, doesn't it?
It's a perfect case study. In many places, public health officials, scientists like Dr. Fauci in the U.S., were generally seen as more trustworthy sources for pandemic info than, say, politicians.
Because the perception was expertise versus maybe political spin?
Often, yeah. The health experts were seen as driven by science and public well-being, while political figures, well, their motives might be seen as more mixed.
Okay, so credibility is huge. What about just who they are, their background, personality?
Definitely important. Those are the demographic and psychographic factors.
Hmm.
Similarity is a big one. We tend to be more open to messages from people who share our background, age, gender, culture, whatever it is.
So reaching a specific community often means finding a messenger from that community.
It makes a huge difference. It's not just about looking representative. It taps into that psychology of trusting people who are like us.
Yeah.
And likability is key, too.
Just a
Well, more like charismatic, relatable, someone people connect with personally. That can sometimes be even more persuasive than formal authority if the connection isn't there.
Is that kind of the secret sauce for influencer marketing?
It really is.
Yeah.
Especially micro-influencers, the ones with smaller, really engaged audiences. Their power often comes from feeling authentic and relatable, like a peer or a trusted friend, even if they aren't a traditional expert.
More than just being famous.
Exactly. Celebrity endorsements use status, sure, but often that feeling of authenticity from a peer, like in customer reviews, can be way more powerful. Research backs that up.
Interesting. And context matters too, right?
Mm-hmm.
The situation must change who works best.
Oh, absolutely. Context is critical. In a crisis, people often want to hear straight from the top, the CEO, the head of state. It shows accountability. But for day-to-day stuff, maybe that's not the best messenger. The medium matters too. Someone great on video might bomb in writing. And, crucially, what does the audience already believe? In a really polarized situation, picking a messenger loved by one side might guarantee the other side tunes out instantly.
So using this well means really understanding the message, the messenger, the audience, and the situation. It's complicated.
It is. There's no single magic bullet messenger.
Okay, so given all that complexity, how do we actually see this working in the real world? Let's look at some applications.
Marketing and advertising are probably the most obvious places. We talked about influencer marketing that's pure messenger effect, leveraging relatability and perceived authenticity.
Right, and user-generated content too. Reviews, testimonials, that 88% stat that consumers trust online reviews like personal recommendations still blows my mind.
It just shows the incredible power of peer messengers. But beyond marketing, think public policy,
Yeah.
health communication. For health info, who do people trust most? Usually, healthcare providers, doctors, nurses. So for things like vaccine advocacy, they are far more effective messengers than politicians generally.
Makes sense. You trust your doctor.
And for changing behaviors, like anti-smoking campaigns, often the most powerful messengers are former smokers or people who've suffered from smoking-related diseases. Their personal stories carry immense weight.
That lived experience gives credibility that, like, a government agency just doesn't have in the same way.
Exactly. It feels more real, more urgent. And remember, the pandemic. Global bodies like the WHO set guidelines, but often it was local leaders, community figures, who were more effective at actually getting people in specific communities to change their behavior. Cultural closeness matters for trust.
Right, that local connection. How about inside organizations?
Oh, it's vital for leadership. When a company hits a crisis, the CEO stepping up, being transparent. Think Satya Nadella at Microsoft turning things around. That CEO as messenger can rebuild trust.
And for just, like, normal changes, new software, new policies.
Usually the best messenger is the direct manager. They have that existing relationship and trust. And for adopting new ways of working, peer champions colleagues who are already using it and advocating for it are often incredibly effective. It leverages that existing network.
Okay, so it really is everywhere. But how do we know it's working? How do you measure the impact of choosing one messenger over another? It seems kind of squishy.
It can seem that way, but measurement is getting pretty sophisticated. Of course, you still have traditional methods surveys, focus groups asking about trust and credibility.
But you mentioned tech earlier.
Right. Neuroscientific tools are giving us more objective insights. We talked about fMRI showing brain activation.
Yeah, the reward centers and the amygdala.
Exactly. Seeing which parts of the brain light up in response to different messengers. And EEG can measure electrical activity related to emotional engagement. Are people more tuned in emotionally to messenger A versus messenger B?
Wow, seeing the brain's reaction directly, that's pretty wild. But maybe a bit much for, say, an e-commerce store.
Probably. But there are more practical behavioral metrics. A/B testing is huge in the digital world.
Right, testing different versions.
You can run the same ad campaign, same landing page, but just swap the messenger. Use influencer A for one group, influencer B for another. Or maybe a customer testimonial versus an expert quote. Then you track clicks, conversions, engagement, which messenger actually drove the desired action.
That gives you hard numbers, much less squishy.
Exactly. And you combine that with surveys measuring perceived credibility, trustworthiness, message acceptance after seeing a particular messenger.
That Huawei study you mentioned earlier sounds like a good example of measuring this stuff.
It is. They presented identical info about Huawei's security, but told one group the source was Russian, another it was from the UK.
And just changing the messenger's nationality changed how credible the message seemed.
Significantly, yes, especially among U.S. audiences given the geopolitical context. But interestingly, people who were already highly skeptical of all media showed less difference. Their general skepticism kind of overrode the specific messenger effect.
Huh. So existing attitudes play a big role in how much the messenger matters.
Absolutely. It highlights the complexity. Measurement is key because the effects aren't always straightforward.
Okay, so we can measure it. But let's circle back to the challenges. Ethics came up before. What are the big pitfalls when using the messenger effect?
There are definitely serious ethical tightropes to walk. A major one is what you might call manufactured credibility.
Meaning?
That's when, say, a company pays an expert, a doctor, a nutritionist, whoever, to endorse their product or idea, but doesn't disclose that payment.
So it looks like independent advice, but it's basically a paid ad.
Exactly. Transparency is absolutely crucial. People deserve to know if a messenger has a vested interest. We see this issue in pharma, the food industry, even academia sometimes.
And what about exploiting vulnerable groups?
That's another big concern. Using carefully selected trusted messengers to target populations who might be less able to critically evaluate persuasion, maybe children, the elderly, people with low media literacy, that feels manipulative and raises serious ethical red flags.
And those biases we talked about earlier, confirmation bias, authority bias, they cause real problems, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Confirmation bias, fueled by messengers who just tell us what we want to hear, deepens divisions, creates those echo chambers. It makes finding common ground so much harder.
A huge issue today.
Definitely. And blindly following authority figures without question, that can lead people to accept misinformation, especially in complex areas like health or finance, just because the expert seems convincing.
And this all gets way harder when you go global, right?
Massively harder. Messenger effects aren't universal. That Huawei study showed nationality matters, perceptions of different countries, different cultures. It all plays in.
And who counts as an authority varies so much.
Totally. In some cultures, maybe it's a village elder or a religious leader who holds the most trust. In others, it might be scientists or celebrities. You can't just assume what works in one place will work elsewhere. Cross-cultural communication needs real sensitivity to these local trust dynamics.
Okay, wow. So using the messenger effect effectively isn't just about picking someone famous or likable. It's deep psychology, understanding context, measuring impact, and navigating some really tricky ethical waters.
It really demands a strategic, responsible, and honestly quite nuanced approach.
So where does this field go next? What's the future look like for understanding and using the messenger effect?
One huge area is definitely the intersection with AI and personalization. Algorithms are getting scary good at analyzing vast amounts of data to predict which specific messenger will resonate most with which specific individual or group.
Like hyper-personalized messenger targeting.
Kind of, yeah, on a massive scale.
Hmm.
And then you have the rise of AI-generated virtual influencers, messengers who aren't even human.
Whoa.
Yeah, it raises all sorts of questions. How do we perceive authenticity or build trust with a messenger we know isn't real? It's fascinating territory.
That's a lot to think about. What about using the neuroscience stuff more directly?
That's evolving too. Using things like biometric feedback, tracking eye movements, facial expressions to get unfiltered, unconscious reactions to messengers. Maybe using VR simulations to test interactions in realistic controlled settings.
So tech is giving us even deeper ways to see how people react.
It seems so, beyond just asking them. And on the regulatory side, expect more pressure for transparency. Stricter rules about disclosing sponsored content, payments to messengers.
Which seems necessary given the potential for misuse.
I think so. And as the world gets more connected, there's more focus on developing truly cross-cultural messenger strategies, training people to be sensitive to those nuances we discussed.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, the messenger effect is clearly not just some minor quirk. It's like a fundamental force shaping how all communication lands.
Absolutely. It's operating constantly, influencing everything from tiny purchasing decisions to major public health outcomes.
And understanding the psychology, knowing how it's used, how to measure it, the ethics involved, that's crucial for anyone trying to communicate effectively today, or even just trying to be a smarter consumer of information yourself.
Right. It pushes us to be more aware of the source, aware of our own biases when we evaluate that source, not just the message content itself.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. As the sources of information keep diversifying, you've got human experts, friends, influencers, algorithms, maybe even AI personalities. How will you decide who to trust? And what does that mean for building real connection and understanding in this crazy, complex information age?
That's the big question, isn't it, for all of us?
It really is. And that brings our deep dive on the messenger effect to a close.
And remember, this deep dive was powered by Growth Suite. Growth Suite helps you harness the messenger effect, optimizing how you present products and messages, using tools like strategically placed testimonials.
Yeah, if you run a Shopify store and want to see how Growth Suite can help connect your products with the right messengers to boost trust and conversions, you can test it for free. Just head over to the Shopify App Store, search for Growth Suite, and give it a try. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.